The wind howled across the barren, Wyoming plains as Thanksgiving Eve settled over the old Cedar Ridge Orphanage, a place that once echoed with laughter, but now trembled under the weight of hunger and winter's cruel bite, its wooden walls groaning like tired bones. Miss Clara, the young caretaker with a heart bigger than the cold sky above her, stood by the frosted window and watched her children, her orphans, push through another day with empty stomachs and brave smiles that tried to hide their despair. She had prayed for a miracle, begged heaven for just a little mercy, because for the first time since she'd taken over the orphanage, there was nothing left. No flour, no beans, no potatoes, not even a scrap of bread for the smallest child. All she had were 12 hopeful faces looking at her, like she was the only candle left in the darkness. Out in the plains, far beyond what her eyes could see, trekked a man no one in town really knew, Elias Holt. A silent rancher with a past he never spoke of, a ranch he rarely left, and a heart still bruised by the memory of the family he once lost. He kept to himself, lived with his horses and the wide, empty land, and carried loneliness the same way other men carried their rifles. But fate had a strange way of tying distant souls together. Earlier that morning, Elias had ridden into town for supplies and overheard 2 merchants whispering that the orphanage ain't got a drop of food left. The kids'll starve tomorrow, and something inside him shifted, like an ember long dead suddenly, catching fire. He didn't speak a word. He simply turned his horse around, rode back to his ranch, and began loading his wagon with everything he had: sacks of flour, beans, dried apples, smoked meats, pumpkin preserves, warm blankets, even toys he crafted for no one in particular. Back at the orphanage, Clara tried to hide her tears as she tucked the youngest children into their cold beds. She whispered stories of hope she didn't quite believe herself, praying they would fall asleep before the hunger kept them awake. Then, just as the night deepened and the last candle flickered out, a sound rose through the darkness: creaking wheels, slow steps of a horse, a lantern glow cutting through the frost, like a miracle arriving on heaven's breath. Clara's heart skipped. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside, and there, standing before her in the silver glow of the moon, was a tall stranger with snow on his hat, a soft sadness in his eyes, and behind him a wagon overflowing with more food and warmth than she had seen in her entire life. Before she could speak, he tipped his hat and murmured, "Heard you might need a little help." And at that moment, when her breath turned to mist and hope finally cracked through despair, Clara realized Thanksgiving had not been forgotten after all. Someone out there still believed in miracles. Or maybe someone out there was one. Before the sun even broke over the horizon, the Cedar Ridge Orphanage buzzed with more life than it had in years. Laughter ringing off the walls as children rushed to help unload the mysterious rancher's wagon, their cold hands eager but careful, eyes wide as they discovered treasures they hadn't dared dream of. Thick loaves of bread, sweet jars of preserves, quilts stitched with warmth, boots that actually fit, and even carved wooden horses that made every little boy beam with wonder. Miss Clara, overwhelmed beyond words, stood beside Elias Holt as he watched the children with a quiet smile, though she noticed how he kept a respectful distance, as if guilt or grief chained him from stepping too close. "You saved them," she whispered. But Elias shook his head softly and replied, "Maybe they're saving me." The children, unaware of the deeper stories carved into the man's silence, invited him to stay for Thanksgiving, and though he hesitated, haunted by memories of a wife and unborn child lost to fever long ago, Clara's gentle insistence finally broke through, and with a deep breath he nodded. The kitchen roared to life. Flour dusted the air. The smell of cinnamon warmed the rooms, and for the first time in years, Clara felt not like a lone guardian, struggling against the world, but like someone who wasn't carrying her burdens alone. As the feast spread out on the long wooden tables, golden cornbread, hearty stew, roasted vegetables, smoked meat, and pies that made the children squeal with joy, Elias found himself seated among them, listening to their stories, feeling small hands tug his sleeve, hearing laughter where his heart had only known silence. And Clara, watching him soften, realized that the mysterious rancher had brought far more than food. He had brought presence, healing, and a warmth that thawed the coldest corners of the orphanage and perhaps the coldest corners of his own soul. As dusk painted the sky with strokes of gold and violet, the children circled Elias and Clara, thanking them with homemade drawings and whispered prayers. And the sight moved Elias so deeply he had to step outside to breathe. Clara followed him, her shawl brushing against his arm. "Why did you come?" she asked gently. Elias stared at the horizon, the memories flickering in his eyes before he murmured, "Because I know what it feels like to lose everything, and I couldn't let them feel that." On a day meant for gratitude, Clara touched his hand, and something shifted, quiet, real, unspoken but undeniable. In that moment, neither of them knew what future the wind might carve for them. But they knew this. Love had arrived in a wagon, driven by a man who thought he had nothing left to give. And Thanksgiving at the orphanage would forever be remembered as the night a miracle knocked on their door. And as the children waved and begged him to come again, Elias realized he wasn't just leaving. Behind gifts, he was leaving a piece of himself and perhaps returning tomorrow to reclaim the peace he found within them. Hope. And to everyone watching this story, if it touched your heart, if it warmed your soul, if you believe love still shows up in unexpected ways, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps keep these stories alive.